Good morning. I'm going to talk a little bit about a technology called FlipIt and FlipIt applied to Econ. How many of you have heard of a FlipIt kind of program? Good. Very popular in physics, moved into Econ and other disciplines. So I teach currently at the Colorado School of Mines, and our course is a big one-semester core Principles of Economics course. So it both addresses the micro side of economics plus also the macro side, but I teach at an engineering school, and Principles of Economics is one of the 3 core humanities and social science classes that our students take. And so it is not always their favorite course. Beginning engineers don't understand the relevance of economics to engineering and engineering disciplines. But why would we expect 18 or 19-year-olds to know what's good for them? So this is very much an eat your broccoli kind of class, but we have modified the material to focus on things that engineers should be interested in. So we talk a lot about economic decision-making, cost-benefit analysis, and then we talk about markets and market structures, and then talk about economic growth and the role of innovation and the role of the creative types that we have in our classrooms to cause economic growth. So the way we teach the course is in 2 large lectures. We call them class. I have a friend in physics who they just relabeled all of their lectures discussions because we're all trying to be more engaging, of course. But 2 large class meetings, about 150 to 300 students each, and then small recitation sections of 20 to 25 taught by PhD students in our mineral and energy economics program. And so, so part of our issue has always been kind of student engagement. So Marcia just talked about how students read the textbook, this online textbook, before they come to class, and they're expected to know some things. And I've been teaching Principles of Economics. I was at Fresno State, where our biggest classroom on campus had 50 seats. That's where I got to start teaching, so I also recognize my privilege there. I taught at Colorado State, and I took Principles of Microeconomics in the same classroom that I slept through it as an undergraduate with 250 students, and now I teach up to 300 students at a time. And so I've always been, I look back through some of my old syllabi from when I first started teaching, I was always telling students, I expect you to read the book before you come. I expect you to be prepared. I expect you to know the basics so that we can do the exciting stuff in class. And so we saw Scott's little message from Dr. Evil about the syllabus, but these statements have been in my syllabus in one form or another every time. The class will be conducted under the assumption that you've gotten these basics. I assume that you have picked up the basics from the reading. And of course, that becomes a tired joke after a while. As you read in the book, right, and the students, the first time they go, and the 5th time they just go, they act like my 15-year-old daughter and roll their eyes and flip their hair. And so I think I have tried everything to make sure students read the book. So back in the dark ages, we did paper and pencil quizzes in class when they came. So some of you are nodding, remember the dark ages. Then I tried online things, and so this might have been a reading quiz, a multiple choice reading quiz they do online, or some just-in-time teach. What did you learn? What do you need more information about? What surprised you? I've used Learning Curve for this, where students go through the learning curve, and none of these things have been particularly effective. And then, when we came to modern technology, a clicker or some other kind of student response device, I was able to bring that into the classroom, but it still didn't give me the information I needed, because our students giving the wrong responses to particular questions because they didn't read or because they legitimately have read and don't understand. And that's been my problem. I just don't have any confidence. And so then I end up taking my very active, interactive semi-flipped classroom back to lecture. Oh, you didn't get this definition, well, let's talk about it. Or you have a question about that, let's talk about it. And all of a sudden, I'm lecturing over and over and over again. And so then I had the chance to test out FlipIt Econ this semester, and I was excited about FlipIt. I wasn't excited. I was cautiously optimistic. And there were three reasons, and one of them was I teach in an engineering school with a very dynamic and very good physics education program. And so I've seen the successes of kind of pre-lecture video and those kinds of things in physics classroom. I've read a lot of the research that came out of physics, and mostly I was excited about these two guys. So Jose Vasquez, who's at the University of Illinois, and Eric Chang at Florida Atlantic University. I always get those mixed up. But they've authored this FlipIt Econ pre-lecture video system. And mostly it was because of these two guys. I've seen them in the classroom. I know how dynamic they are and how successful they are as teachers, and if they're willing to put their name on this thing, I thought it would be pretty good. So the way the FlipIt system works is that there is a pre-lecture video, or a set of videos, a series of videos, very short, 2-3 minutes. They've got this great animation of these little cartoon characters, and I guess the videos make me look more dynamic in the classroom because the videos aren't outdoing me, which has been a problem in the past. The students watch these videos. They get, after each video, they get a little multiple choice kind of check-in question. Maybe they get another video, another check-in question, up to 2 or 3 minute videos in each section. And the students had really good feedback from this. So we did some student focus groups. I also asked students at an end of semester evaluation. And so they found these videos to be useful. They liked that they were short, that they were to the point, but they weren't dumbed down. And so I have students who are some of the brightest kids you could want to teach. And so they all, sometimes we show a cartoon or I show a video in class and they say, you're treating us like kids. Well, you are kids. But they're really worried about being talked down to. They're very sensitive to that. I'm not quite sure why that, if I were that smart, I would, well, actually they're just not, maybe they're just not very sensitive. But after they watch the video, then the key part of this is not the videos, but these bridge questions. And this is what, it took me a while to kind of catch on to what these bridge questions are all about. They really are creating a bridge between the video and class time. And so these bridge questions are asked a multiple choice question, and then the key part is that students explain their reasoning. And so the only way they get credit for answering this question is to give an explanation of their reading, of their reasoning. And sometimes that explanation is space, right? And sometimes it's what, and sometimes it's a paragraph about how they're thinking about these questions. And so some students recognized that these were good ways to keep them engaged while they're watching the video. That's really, I kind of tuned out on a few videos and I got to the bridge question, no clue what the answer was. And I'm an expert in the field. So it really does force them to pay attention, or it's a bad question. Forces them to pay attention to the video content, and it is some review. And the key point here is that this student hit the nail on the head, but some of them have multiple correct answers. In many of these questions, there's this purposeful ambiguity. And when I first saw these questions, I was just looking at the questions about watching the video or thinking about how I'd use this class, and I wrote back to Eric and Jose and said, hey, question 4 in section 3 is just all the questions, all the answers are correct. And my co-teacher and I would argue over which was the correct answer. And then after talking to Eric and Jose, they said, yeah, good job. Exactly what we wanted to happen. That's exactly what we want your students to do. And so I have an example of one of these, and this is a pretty standard thing in economics to think about scarcity, right? Some people mislabel economics as the science of scarcity. Scarcity is just not that interesting, but if you see a large group of stranded passengers by a bus, you only have a few seats in your car, deciding who to take is a question of what? You can see probably not macroeconomics. That probably doesn't make any sense. But clearly, to me, this is a question of scarcity, right? I have to make this decision because the number of seats I have is limited relative to the need. That's a classic definition of scarcity. Matches exactly what's going on in the video. But you can see that 30% of my students think it's an efficiency question or an equity question. Perfect way to talk about what we mean by scarcity, which is such a fundamental concept that I'll just say, okay, we all know about scarcity, we can't do everything, we can't have anything, we can't eat everything, move on. And this gives us a chance then in class to come back and talk about this. So the method works that in class, you take one of these questions with multiple answers, give them a student thinking. For each of the answers here, macro only showed up with one student, so I left that one out. This was early on in the semester, so I had longer explanations because I really liked them. But these students who are thinking about efficiency and equity, which is really how do you decide? Not the fact that you have to decide. The fact you have to decide is about scarcity, but how you decide, you may think about, well, what's the most efficient? What creates the greatest total surplus? That might be taking the person who's willing to pay the most in your car. Equity may be taking the person who has the greatest, who you feel is more deserving. And this led to a 15-minute discussion with small groups, pairs, sharing out in the whole class, passionate discussion about this question. And then, of course, I got to, well, but what's the right answer? I said, well, it depends. What kind of question are you trying to answer? You're trying to think about the way an economist would think about it? Well, clearly, it's scarcity. You're trying to think about reasoning and applying these fundamental notions of efficiency and equity to your decision? Then you might give a different answer. The key is that this is not, I said, rest assured, this is not a multiple choice exam question. I would never give you this question because it has this built-in ambiguity, whereas an exam question would be much more clear. Then we can talk about expectations about the exam, but this got students talking about three key things: scarcity, efficiency, and equity in class. And so bringing every time the students do this, they bring this into class. This is not a picture from my class. This is from the FlipIt website because that guy's smiling, clearly not one of my students. And so this notion about we discussed the problems in class. It gave me some kind of basic understanding, but not of grammar. And then this key thing, it helped me think about what questions to ask. Because I had to stop and reflect on my learning, and that helped me think about what questions I'm going to ask. So this program is very, very popular with the students. And then I had this almost perfect. I read it this morning, and I thought I should have said almost perfect. FlipIt was a great tool for learning the material before coming to class. Exactly what we want them to do. At a certain level, right? Maybe at those first couple of Bloom's levels, we want them to have the basics so that we can do the analysis and the application in class. Questions reinforced a tricky concept. Tricky, I don't think it's complicated or where there's lots of misconceptions. But of course, students think that's tricky. You're trying to trick me. Well, I'm trying to trick you into thinking. That often takes tricking. And then things that needed additional explanation. The key here, what this person didn't say is that so we can do the interesting stuff in class, so that we can do the things where I'm really valuable. And I talk to my students at the beginning of the semester, where do you get your information? When you need to get basic information about something, where do you go? None of them ever list to a lecture, to a class, right? They all say, I'm going to look it up on Wikipedia, I'm going to watch a video on YouTube, I'm going to talk to an expert. And so this is what I want them to do. I want them to use my time effectively. And that's the part about flipping that I like. Where am I most useful? I'm less useful as a deliverer of information and more useful as a designer of learning opportunities. And so the way they get us to communicate that today is by me lecturing to you. So our question became, did this work? So when I wrote my abstract to try to come to this meeting, I had this data on midterm exams. And so you can see I was probably pretty excited. My midterm exam scores were higher. So we changed the format. Instead of having 2 exams, we went to 3 exams. And that's a different story. But I saw substantial gains, and these midterm exams were adjusted in some way, right? They were curved a little bit. And so the averages on these exams, the medians on these exams were closer to 69. These are unadjusted. So going from 69 up to 8, so full letter grade gain in exams. Of course, they had a smaller amount of material in a slightly different format for the exam, so it wasn't crystal clear. So then I started thinking about the final exam. We've given a common final exam over the last 3 semesters. And so you can see the final exam scores didn't change at all. But the final exam was all multiple choice, maybe not the best assessment of the learning outcomes we want because we did more interaction, maybe the final exam not good. Whereas these midterm exams had more analysis and explanation and synthesis kinds of things. Students actually did worse in the class overall. We're still a little worried about that. We did have a blizzard on final exam day in fall of 2015, so that became an optional exam, and the median score was significantly lower because everybody who had an A didn't show up for the time. Now, what I was interested in is time on task. So I looked through my data from FlipIt, and this would be my example of analytics. The only way to get data on time on task is to go through each assignment, download the time on task for each assignment. So I had a TA spend most of final exam week, because he owed me some hours, downloading all of these data. And then I had to summarize them. I had to analyze them and sort them and match them back to my grade book. That's what I did on the plane, which is hard to do in this much space, no mouse. And so this is what I found. So I divided the time on task by quartile, and the first quartile had a median of about 4 hours over the semester. Remember, these videos come in packs of 10 minutes or so each. And so these students are spending on a median of about 4 minutes on each assignment. They couldn't even watch one video. So that's the bottom quartile. All the way up to the top, these students spent a median of 10 hours on this during the semester. And so you can see that both on each exam, much more so on the early exams, and then in course grades, there is this correlation between time spent in the FlipIt system, both watching the videos and answering the bridge questions, and their performance in the class. And if we want to think the performance in the class hopefully is associated with learning in some way, then maybe that helps. So if you have any ideas about that or things we should do or other analysis, I would appreciate hearing what you have to say.
I have a question.
Oh, shoot.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to ask you how you graded, or if you graded the free response rationale for each question.
They were all based on participation.
So, like, if you wrote letters.
If
you wrote letters that made words?
They figured out, no, they figured out if you wrote a space, you got it. Oh, okay. And that's why in our grades was kind of participation in this was 5% of the course grade. And so it was straight up participation, which is why we got people spending, I can't remember what the minimum was, but I think it was 3 minutes total over the semester.
Wow, that's amazing. Awesome. Do you think you'll do it different?
Yes.
I mean, that's famous too, right? Like, we want them to do free response stuff, but we don't really have time to grade it.
Right.
But I've been thinking about sort of like, if I grade
one of them
10% of the students each time or something,
right.
And like it's random.
Does it have the technology that the discussions do in Launchpad where it has a word count and you can set like,
no.
At least they have to do a certain number of words, and that way it can auto-grade, but they don't get the points unless they at least meet a minimum of some sort?
Yeah.
Does videos go with the particular textbook?
No, they're textbook agnostic. So we used it with the Krugman well.
Oh, I see.
What a lot of folks have done with this is they'll use, especially if they're using a quicker response system of any sort, they'll bring student responses into class and ask some of the bridge questions again. And that seems to be plenty incentive for a lot of students. They just like seeing that their stuff's getting used in class, even if they're, you know, their names.
15 seconds? Yeah.
Yeah, just, that's what a lot of people have done with it, and I've heard more than one person say they've had tremendous success with that.
But even less than grading them, I think